Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou e hara mai, e tautoko ana i te kaupapa nei. Ko Hector Kaiwai taku inga, ko te kaiwhakahaere o Rangahau, ki te taho toku pāpang o Ngāti Parau, ki te taho toku mama o Mani o Poto, me tu hoi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So, kia ora everybody, my name is Hector. This is probably another example of getting voluntold, but from my Pākehā colleague. So, just another long story short. This idea for this particular kaupapa was actually meant to just be with our ethics committee. So we've had them for the last couple of years, and we felt we needed to come together and kind of discuss some of the issues that were coming up in our ethics committee. But there's this thing called the Waipareira way, and we don't do things in small bits. So we went from this very contained sort of idea, and now we have half the planet here today. So, but we are very glad to have you here along, and thank you for coming to support. Today we're going to be talking about some work that I did with my wonderful colleague, Dr. Tony O'Connor, and I shall get him to introduce himself, even though I've pretty much already introduced him. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Hector. So I'm a Pākehā researcher, so I feel kind of like, I don't know, very honoured and humbled to be in this room full of such wonderful people as researchers as well as wonderful people. So I've got something to say today, and I very much hope you find it to be of value. So Hector and I have known each other well for about 3 years now. And we've got another big project underway, which is awesome. I love working with Hector. I learned so much from him, and especially in spaces like this, I've got so much to learn, but, I'm doing my best. So what we're talking about today is an evaluation we did together of an organisation called Safe Man, Safe Family. So that was a collaborative project between Awa and the company I'm with, Point & Associates. I've got a colleague here, Annalise. So maybe Hector just pop up for a second and can introduce the organisation. And then, I'll take over.
I suppose the sort of point today of kind of bringing Tony along. I was going to share the story because quite a few of your fans are here today, Barry. So another long story short, Tony presented at the ANZIA presentation, was conference a few months ago, wasn't it? I just was talking to a few of my colleagues from Māori Research, and they kept going on about this guy called Tony. And I was like, oh, okay. And they said, he just did this wonderful presentation, it was really engaging, and we loved the way that he presented. It took me a while because, the brain, but eventually I was able to put two and two together, and then figured out it was my good friend Tony O'Connor who they were talking about. So part of me bringing him along today is to keep your fans happy, bro. Yeah. So, kia ora. Did you want me to do something else for thing? Because I think that's enough. I'll get you to kind of carry on. I do know I've got a few slides in there, so I'll just jump up when we do that.
So, there's lots of slides here we're not actually going to use today. But Safe Man, Safe Family. So they're a really interesting organisation. They call themselves peer-led, professionally supported organisation, and that's core to what I'm going to be talking about here, and I think it's core to what a lot of people have been talking about here. Doing research in a really ethical way, it should be led by the people that we're working with, and we are there in support. So they're leading the way for us, and they are quite unusual in the space that they work in, family violence, and that they have men who are committed to becoming safe, leading their journey. And then there's a psychologist, there's a psychiatrist, there's a social worker. Those professionals are there to support the men on their journey to become safe. And that's a principle that we took to the evaluation in that the men led the way, and we were there to support them on that journey of telling their story, but also us there as evaluators to demonstrate how does change actually happen? Is change actually happening? And to what extent is that change actually happening? Do you want to...
I was just going to quickly add too, so as we kind of talk through these slides, I kind of want you to kind of keep the concept of the pōwhiri in the back of your mind, because that's what the process was, so we'll make sure to kind of share quite a few of those stories, how important relationships were, building that trust and confidence, and that kind of manifested in lots of different ways, e.g., when we first turned up at the door and we met this man, so some of you might know Vic Tamati, who's done a lot of work, especially working with men and working in the sort of family and sexual violence space. Basically, let's just say that when we first went to the door, we got I can't repeat exactly what he said, but basically said, "Who the are you?" And let's just say there was quite a few muffins, about, and cup of teas before we were even allowed to be in the door. But to me, this just say I had to pull on all my Kaupapa Māori training, building those relationships and understanding that was going to be the process. And so for me, it was definitely about that pōwhiri. So part of that pōwhiri was the wero at the beginning, and then we'll carry on and we'll kind of explicate that idea as we kōrero a bit more. Kia ora.
So Tia and Lily have already talked a little bit about where the review boards come from, and there's something that I just want to draw a little bit of attention to here. They talked about the universal set of principles, but then also referencing local principles, and obviously in New Zealand that's all based around tikanga, but I think there's another layer of local again. And in this case, it's the Safe Man, Safe Family set of principles about how they do their work. And I mentioned the idea of peer-led, professionally supported. So that peer leadership was a principle that we had to build into our process. And the pōwhiri that Hector referred to, that went on for a long time. and it's really interesting because I thought that after a while, they've welcomed us into their space. We got on about doing our work, and then it was like, we've been taken to another space now. We've been welcomed even further, and that went on for basically 2 years, the whole term of that project. There was like this, it's kind of like just peeling back the layers of the onion, just like getting deeper and deeper into the heart of what they were about. And fair call to them. These men, they've done terrible things, but a lot of terrible things have happened to them too. And fair enough, they really had a lot of mistrust of people in authority. And we represented that, We tried to be humble, but we were still there, commissioned by the MSD to do work on behalf of the MSD, to figure out what are these guys doing, are they actually becoming safe men? So there's a lot of, implicit judgment by us being present there. So it took quite some time for us to be able to be trusted. So we've got here these realities of community-based research and evaluation, and it's obviously highly relational. There's, I think it's fair to say that ethics review boards, they do, and rightly so, have concern about, are you actually qualified to do this work? Do you have the expertise? What's the framework that you're going to be using to, analyse the data? What methods are you going to be using? They're all really important questions, but I think too there's, kōwaio. People want to know that, and I've got to show them who I am for people to know if they can actually trust me or not. And the other point there is about social realities, and it's plural. Lily talked about this. There's different cultural frameworks. And also, like within the family violence space, as I mentioned, Safe Man, Safe Family do things very differently again. So there is a typical way that violence intervention providers do their work, but the reality at Safe Man, Safe Family is different to that. So these realities, they unfold over time. So while we do have a plan, and that's what ethics committees expect us to have a plan, we don't really know how it's actually going to go until we get in there and do the work. So plans change, and we need to be able to think on our feet. And I'm not saying that those plans aren't important in the first place. Of course they are, but we really don't know how things are going to roll until we get into the heart of the work. And as things unfold, rightly so, community leaders want to have a say in what should happen now. We had a plan, but now things are a little bit different. And the way that we did our work, we structured the governance of the project, so to speak, in such a way that Safe Man, Safe Family had a really meaningful seat on the research governance group, where we met monthly and reported to them how things are going, any issues, and Safe Man, Safe Family were privy to those conversations and had decision-making power because they were on our steering group. So, institutional review boards assume that we as researchers and they as independent experts have an ability to make sound decisions about how projects should proceed. And that's absolutely right. There is that second opinion, independent review. But I do, in this case, the Safe Man, Safe Family project, feel that the extent or the level of detail that is expected about how projects will proceed, who's going to be involved, how and when, can be a little bit overstated. Because, as I say, we don't know how things are really going to go until we get in there. And I think, I've just got one example here of information sheets. Now, we've had information sheets required by ethics committees running to 7 pages. And, when we look at the level of a lot of people's reading ability in New Zealand, 40% of people have a limited ability to read. So to me, I think that's quite an unreasonable expectation that people can be fully informed by reading 7 pages of dense text. But we've got another example here of a really lovely information sheet that was used by one of my colleagues. It's really engaging, lots of images, and it gets the main points across, which I think is all that we can really be sure of at the start of a project. We don't really know how things are going to go, but the key points, the basic principles of how things will go should be quite clearly understood up front. But again, even that might change. What I'm trying to say here really is that some of the forms that are approved by committees can feel a little bit enforced by me, assuming that we really know how things will go when really we don't. So the MSD's Ethics Committee is a committee that assessed our proposal, and they were super helpful. They were a really helpful committee. They acknowledge that, of course, there's going to be, or likely to be, a bit of balancing needed between different worldviews sometimes and different assumptions about, it's really interesting, Tia mentioning autonomy. I thought autonomy might be a universal principle, but he did a pretty good job of demolishing that. But so at the outset of a study, and also as a study is underway, there could be a little bit of negotiation required. And the MSD's Ethics Committee, they make themselves available for review, once a project's underway, if things do change, which is great. But my little question there at the bottom is, But what about allowing local control over ethical assessment? Now, Safe Man, Safe Family certainly did take control. And, Vic's a really sharp, very insightful man. So the peer leadership came up again and again and again all the way through the project. And we just had a meeting with them yesterday, actually, where again, the leadership over what do we do now with this massive evaluation report that we wrote, which they want to produce into something a little bit more accessible to get the work out there a little bit more. It was like, well, what do they want? What a Safe Man, Safe Family want to do here? They have their own principles governing the activity, governing the evaluation activity. So I've got a little example here of something that changed. It's a long way down. Something that changed in the plan was that we told the ethics committee at the beginning, in good faith, that what would happen is that Safe Man, Safe Family would screen, so to speak, the men who would be introduced to us to make sure that, because some of these men were quite acutely unwell, acutely traumatised. So they wanted to be sure that the people that we got to speak to were in a well enough space to be able to safely do so. But then pretty much as soon as it got underway, Vic was like, no, we won't do it like that. What we think you should do is, you boys should go and join the group, go get to know the men, and the men can get to know you, and they can decide for themselves if they want to speak to you or not. So, okay, cool. And I've got to say, that was a deeply meaningful, touching, moving experience where I got to know myself in ways I didn't really know before, and I also got to connect with men in ways that I'd never connected before. It took a few months before the men felt comfortable enough to say, or interested enough to say, I'll speak with you. But they did. And by the time they did say that, they'd speak with us, we already knew each other pretty well. So the interviews generated such rich information. And some of the stories I've heard were I really struggled with, to be honest. But they shared those stories, and they shared them for a purpose, and it was to show the reality of what it takes to move from a really dark space, into the light. Safe Man, Safe Family calls that process uncover, discover, recover, and that uncover is a lot going on there. So the men ended up so we ended up creating our own process, and that was the process that was ethical for that community. Vic didn't really care too much about the ethics committee at the MSD. He cared about his own men and the own community and what works for them, and that's the process that we had to work to. So another significant change to the plan was the Whānau worker. She would be screening, adult kids, partners, for the same purposes. Any traumatised people would not be made known to us or introduced to us, but that changed too. And the family members started to come forward of their own volition. Once they, heard that, Hector and Tony are okay, they're safe men. And but again, that was a big change. And at the beginning of our project, when we formed that steering group, we said that we would return to the committee if we did feel the need to do so. But we felt that the steering group, with the Safe Man, Safe Family representation, there was Vic there, the psychiatrist was on the group, the psychologist was on the group, 2 people from MSD, the contract manager, and a family violence expert. They formed our steering group. And it was in that context where we raised ethical issues, or they might have raised some for themselves. And we had discussions about how to best move forward. So we felt we never needed to go back to the MSD. I'm jumping all over the show now, but so the keys to the steering group success. And we did feel, it was a pretty successful group. Having the community leaders on the group was obviously a key. They knew everybody in the community very well. They were trusted by the community. And it's actually a key to what makes participatory research practice successful or not, are those people who are representing the community in your research or evaluation discussions, do they actually have the mana to do so? Do the community respect those people, trust those people to be able to speak on their behalf? And in the Safe Man, Safe Family case, that was certainly so. And the people in the steering group really trusted each other. We had each other's backs, but we also trusted that they would raise difficult conversations if they needed to be had, and that those conversations could be had in a constructive way. So really diverse skill sets on the group, expertise. Like I said, there's a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker. There's the policy knowledge as well from the MSD. And we reported to them monthly. We wrote reports and then we talked through those reports. And another key is that everybody was able to participate on this group in paid work time. So I've got a slide here that's from a Ministry of Health Research Ethics Symposium on YouTube. That's the title of it if you want to go and have a look at it. And they note the changing relationship between researchers and the public. What they've identified here is that consumers, call them consumers, are more involved these days in things like identifying research priorities, planning and research design, assisting with the conduct of research, improving participant information, surveys, questionnaires, contributing to the evaluation of research results, disseminating research findings, but no mention of ethics. But I think that, or as I've been talking about now, I think that's a really productive and I think arguably ethical, or really the only ethical, possibly, way to work with communities, is to be sure that they're properly involved in determining, is this how you want the research to roll? Does this look like good practice to you? Another slide here is from a scientist based in the UK, and I really like this line at the bottom. Not this one. But, we are better together. We are better together. We must all be ethicists now. But without being too Pollyanna-ish about it, I just want to go back a few slides. Because in the participatory research literature, in the participatory research literature, some researchers make the point that participatory ethics isn't inherently ethical. It can still be really problematic, and it can be done in a way that is unethical. And I mentioned that point of mana, the people from the community who are part of those conversations need to be the right people. And there needs to be a clear purpose of involving those people. So is it token? We've heard a little bit about that in the Māori research space. Researchers could be there just to look good. But that's obviously not ethical if they don't have real power over the research process. And there's got to be benefits that flow. And I found that really interesting, Tia's presentation on koha. And something that we do at Point is that we do try and leave communities with something. And something that we have done a couple of times now is involve young people in our projects. And hopefully they feel that they've got something out of that, some learning about what it is to be a researcher. And we provide references and that kind of thing, pay them. So the potential positives, I've mentioned that point about richer data. That was certainly, I think so, that we managed to do that. And our plans are much better informed because of Safe Man, Safe Families involvement. And there's knowledge and skills transfer. I don't know, hopefully. Hopefully they feel that happen for them too. But the potential negatives there are the potential for irrevocable disagreement. And I think that's really great that the MSD, for instance, the MSD's committee makes itself available for subsequent review, because if we as a steering group or research team did get to the point where we just couldn't, agree on what to do, there's still that independent ethics board available as another opinion. And captures a similar point, I think. I'm not sure, maybe. But yeah, we'll see.
No, I didn't have anything to say, but okay, I'll think of something now. So I suppose really from my perspective, and I kind of mentioned this before, part of this project for me was BAU. It wasn't even about being a researcher, it was actually about being Māori, and there were so many things throughout that process that being Māori actually helped. Again, understanding when you first go to some place that they have their own tikanga, they have their own kawa. So in terms of what consent looked like, what ethical looks like, I understood that this community have their own ideas about what that is. Getting to the gate and getting the 2-year whittle. But then also me being okay with that, to understand that is just part of the process, and especially when you take into account the men that we were working with at that time. Again, many of them users of violence, but also many of them who had also experienced violence, terrible violence. I think the other thing that that really came to me was around the power of kanohi kitea. So what Bic was really basically saying to us is that we need to show up, bro. We need to show our faces, not just do the typical research project, quick in, quick out, just go and get what you need, thanks for coming. And so maybe you've blocked this out of your mind, but that was a really long process of us, going to the men's Sunday sessions that they would have, turning up to events, making sure that our face was seen. And it was through that process, that long 2-year process, that we were able to build up that trust, build up that confidence with the men. So again, really for me, it was just about being Māori. What does that also say? That the way that we do things, the way that we think about the world, the way that we engage with the world, it doesn't just work for us. I feel like I'm starting to do the, what works for Māori works for everybody. But in fact, if we just look at our tikanga kawa, really at the heart of it, it's just about being human-centred, being whānau-centred. It's about people, It's not about what's actually on a piece of paper or what some ethics committee has done. And I'm not running down ethics committee because we have one. And just so you know too, the MSD ethics committee, there's some really great people on that committee, and I know people who are committed to ensuring that our whānau are safe. And the first person, I think it was Tracy McIntosh, is on that committee as well. But what's my point there? It's because I know Tracy, I know who she is, and so that having that relationship and building up that relationship with the men, they know who we are and what we were about, and so they have this term at Safe Men, Safe Family, right? Being a safe man, but in terms of the context of today, this has been about what they would call an ethical man. This is what ethical looks like to them. So is that all right? All right. Are you sitting there and going to wind this up or something? Or So, that's it. That's it from me, and that's sort of my reflection. I suppose it's question time, right? Yeah? All right. Kia ora. Tony, you need to come up here, bro. They might have some questions. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really good, and I like the discussion about the Research Advisory Board. And one of the things I've built into all my research in the last few years is a Research Advisory Board, but I'm using the word kāhui because it's a Māori, it's the kupu, but also there's a tikanga behind it. So when we first started doing that, we had to argue the case on what's this Maori thing. But actually, it's becoming increasingly used across non-Māori research, and the idea of a kāhui at the highest level and being funded appropriately, meeting fees, having kaumātua and kuia on your kāhui, having iwi representation on your kāhui, not just academics, means that we, the researchers, get a much richer quality of not just advice but tautoko. So that was something that I'm, increasingly supportive of, encouraging other researchers to build into their research proposals from the outset. But the last thing I want to make a point about is that I'm really proud to live in a country that has some of the most rigorous research ethics criteria in the world. I have mates in Australia and America who say to me, so much crap to go through just to get research. But you know what? I see ethics as about protecting us. Like that research about Green and National Women's, that is despicable. I have no words to talk about how despicable it was that New Zealand women died because of the lack of research ethics. So I'm really happy to go through all the hoops that we go through, because it makes me a better researcher. It makes me a better Māori. It makes me a better member of my community. So it's hoha as hell. I know that, especially when as a Māori you have to fill out the treaty question.
That's so true.
I've got a pat answer for you.
we were
I go,
exhausted by the end.
Māori had a relationship before the treaty, so I'm not going to answer this question. Because I am tangata whenua, not tangata tiriti. It is up to tangata tiriti to fill out that question. But I love the fact that we are so tough on researchers and we make ourselves accountable. So that's like my passing thought about research ethics.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I love what you said, and as you were talking too, a lot of the kaupapa that we have here, it doesn't go through a research sort of ethics committee, but I just want to just thank our kaumātua here, for instance. There's been so many projects that we've done here that wouldn't have been possible without them, having our kaumātua there to actually to facilitate that process for us, and through that process, going through that, and I'm just thinking about you, Matua Albi, just the support that you gave on our Māori-led inquiry, being able to go up north and have your mana there to quote-unquote provide that protection, going into other communities. I'm not saying anything about up north, but there were mention of guns and shootings. But again, I think there's not a reimagining, but again, we've got so many processes within Te Ao Māori that can help guide us through that process. And again, I just want to acknowledge you, Lily, as well, because I felt like that was your presentation today for all of us. Kind of laid the grounds. The thing that really came forward for me, I feel like I'm getting to the reflections bit already. Ethics is tikanga. And I think that's basically what I'm saying, and this is going to be my process, that having that tikanga, having that strong tikanga, having that strong kawa in place helped actually protect me through all these projects. And I can say with hand on heart, I have never had a project that has gone bad. And again, it's just been making sure that we have those great relationships and we treat people with respect, and I'm just always thinking about a lot of the work that I do as a researcher, especially in this Māori space. It's the same findings all the time about how do we engage our whānau, how do we get better outcomes for them. Treat them with respect, treat them with compassion, treat them with empathy. It seems so simple, but again, we seem to get it wrong over and over again. So, anyway, I can see I'm going on my little rant there, but kia ora. But do we have any other questions, I suppose?
Great, thank you.
Kia ora. Right, kia ora whānau. Yeah. So, do I get half of this, or?
You hit the bag.
So, just again, thank you, bro. I do remember you giving me quite a few phone calls and quite a few emails. Being, there was a little bit of trepidation in coming to today, and maybe coming into let's just say a very strongly pro-Māori environment. But my response to that was, hey, that's usually me, usually going into a very pro-Pākehā environment. But like I said, your fans were here today, and so we can't disappoint your fans. But anyway, here's a small little gift from us, and thank you for your time. Kia ora. So I've again been volunteered to do the reflections towards the end, so I will just make sure to keep an eye on our time. And I haven't got a whole lot of notes down here. And Rewa, how much time do I have to rattle on? 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay. All right. So I suppose I'm going to just start backwards and work my way through, from our last speaker to our first, mainly because it's about memory, and I'm obviously remembering the last things that we talked about. So I think the kind of key thing for us, and maybe from one of the key messages from Tony today, was around, this idea of the longest porphyry ever. I think what we didn't really share, so I think we've got most of the reflections from there, but probably what we didn't really share too, but something that you touched on, Ella, was around when you have a sort of relations or relational based sort of approach, that can actually be really bloody tiring, I mean, I remember us getting to the end, particularly you, just saying, oh, you must be so happy, we've got to the end of this project. But I could see you were really tired as well, So yes, does it get a bit better result? Does it get better outcomes when you make sure that you have those good relationships in place, yes, but it also comes at a emotional cost as well. And so, I suppose it's about understanding that and being willing to put in the work. Again, like I said, for whānau, the power of kanohi kitea, was really meaningful for them. And the other thing that was really meaningful for them was mahi te mahi. If you're going to say something, you better do it. So show up and do. So, big revelation there. So anything else that you want to add for that, bro? So I think that's kind of a good reflection on that. Tia, hopefully you kind of picked up from today that, there's a lot more kōrero for us to have around this concept of koha. What I found quite interesting, during your conversation was normally, Tia has a lot to say. If you've ever gone to the ethics committee, you have a lot to say. So it was very interesting kind of seeing you in this space. And just to let you know too, I think I'm in Tia's bad books at the moment because he hates public speaking. But hopefully you can tell from today that people, George, great value from that conversation today. I was talking to via Betty Tunks over here, so she's expecting you to write a letter to Oxford because she saw on there, on the definition of koha, the plural of koha are kohas. So, Fire Media made sure to tell me that we need to be writing to Oxford and letting them know that the plural of koha is koha. I think there were some wonderful things that you brought up, Ella. No offence or anything, but some of us younger researchers, we don't know a lot of the whakapapa. We do know, sort of, I suppose, we understand that there's been a fight that's happened. I think there's something in there around, some of us forgetting about that fight. It's not, and I don't think it's quite the right word. I don't think it's we're forgetting about it, but we don't really understand, the stories. And a lot of those stories, like the ones that you shared, I suppose that's kind of only contained by just a few people. They're starting to get lost. So I suppose, yes, my challenge to you, Ella, is I'll see you next year at the podium, because I just love listening to you today and sharing that whakapapa around sort of, the fight that's needed to happen to even just get our voices heard, especially in sort of universities and academic environments as well. And last, but certainly not least, is Lily. I just want to thank you for your kōrero today. I felt that actually your kōrero not only provided the context, but the foundations for today's kōrero, and I feel that the conversations that we've been able to have today is because you provided the fertile grounds for those conversations to happen. Like I said, the thing that came through for me was this idea is ethics is about tikanga. And I suppose just talking just from my own personal experiences that if you have tikanga and kawa, good tikanga and kawa in place, that's going to keep you safe through this whole process. Actually, I was just saying I've been lucky and always had really great projects, but I feel like I need to knock on some wood now, because who knows, something else might happen tomorrow. The other thing that I loved you talking about too, and I think the power of tikanga was talking about whakapapa, ko wai au, ko wai koe, ko wai koutou, or ko wai rātou. So I suppose that's kind of what happened too. It brings back my experience with working with Safe Men, Safe Family. Again, getting challenged at the door, literally challenged at the door about, who again, not pretty words, are you? But then I also had I also responded. Actually, I'm not sure. Is this getting recorded? But I also responded as well. I was like, well, who are you? But through that whole process, you know, I'm just trying not to use this person's particular words, but I suppose what kind of happened in that process is that we were able to come to an understanding from understanding who we were individually. So I found that really powerful. The other thing that I think we kind of forget too, and I think this is kind of happening in this process, is part of that whanaungatanga, and I think there's the power of talk, but there's also the power of humour and Māori humour as well. You know, I feel like that's always something that's been another really powerful sort of tool, you know, in terms of making sure that we get that really sort of positive engagement, you know. So, and I think the other powerful thing too, so people think, oh, laughter, humour, and kai. But actually, those are probably some of our most powerful tools when we were engaging with our community, especially kai, when you're working with young people, they love it. Actually, I shouldn't say pizza, salads, and fresh tomatoes, so those sorts of things. So again, sometimes I feel like those things get belittled, you know, but actually those things are actually vital and actually end up being, really important. And the last thing I want to say too is, I suppose we're kind of talking about koha and we're talking about kai, all these K words at the moment. First of all, I'm kind of getting, I think there's going to be there's a lot more writing to put into our ethics after today, right? I feel like those, I'm thinking about how much more work we might need to put into putting those together. But there's such a rich sociology, right, around these concepts of kai, around these concepts of koha as well, that I suppose we're not really sort of capturing. But my thinking around that too, and I'm just thinking about, Linda and Graham and all their work. They've saved us that effort, right, of having to justify kaupapa Māori or justify Māori ways of knowing, And I remember Graham talking about, that was one of the main impetuses for him developing kaupapa Māori theory. So, because he said before, that time, when Māori would talk about Māori things, they only could say, just refer, this is the Māori way, but having to put that rigor behind that. And I'm feeling that something kind of similar might need to happen in this space, and I feel we have the right people here to kind of make that happen. So am I volunteering all of you as well? Yes. So, Nōreira. That's it. I suppose that's my reflections for today. And just before I carry on, do we have any other questions, or did anybody else kind of want to share some reflections from today? So I'll make a little bit of time available. Kia ora. Okay. Kia ora, Helen.
I want to say something. As a psychologist, my responsibilities, the chair was talking about IRD definition of koha. I found myself getting in and seeing that they are capturing our knowledge, redefining it, and feeding it back to us.
You got a lot of work, Tia. Good luck. Anybody else? All right.
I guess there's one little area that sort of has come up in the course of our mahi is the area of clinical trials. And I'm often told that the koha is that these people get to receive treatment in clinical trials. And if we're growing the area, we're growing the opportunity for people to have access to clinical trials over the coming decades, and in the Auckland area, I can see that there needs to be a lot of work done around the thought concepts of koha in that particular area.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Just one, but it's a big topic this week, I guess. Conflicts of interest. But you know, and as Māori researchers, we're always in a conflict of interest, always, every time, for loads of reasons. I won't go too deep into it, but yeah, just the importance of declaration, etc. You know, that'll always keep you safe, just like Lily said around tikanga. And I just want to mihi to my friend Lily, who I was on a research committee with for many years, and it's lovely to see her. And ngā mihi kia koutou.
Yeah. I was just saying too, just very recently, so I'm on the Health Research Council, one of the assessment panels with my good colleague and friend over here, Dr. Tanya Allport, and that comes up all the time, right? Like we can be assessing something. We've got like 7 people on that panel. I think one time we had to have like four people come off because of conflict of interest, you know, and I think that has brought up some, you know, interesting sort of dilemmas for us, right? Because like you said, we're always going to have a conflict of interest. Unfortunately, I've worked with all of you, you know, in one way or another, but I suppose what it kind of comes down to is who does conflict of interest benefit? You know, today we've talked about, you know, the importance of relationships, importance of knowing people. So why is that seen as, you know, I can understand what, I suppose, with this whole kind of conflict of interest stuff, but it also goes back to what you were saying, Liddy, about this false idea of objectivity, right? It's about, if you know that person or if you've worked with that person, you can't be objective. But if I was going to be honest, how that committee works, or when we make those assessments, I can tell you now, we can all look at the same proposal and have very different views about that. But what is the process there? It's absolutely all about subjectivities, but then there's a final conversation that we have at the end to come to a consensus, you know. So again, I think there's some sort of maybe some old school thinking, some old school sort of scientific concepts that still lurk around. One more example around the sort of objectivity sort of cordial that we had. So I was also part of an ethics committee when we first went into COVID, and they were talking about how do we make decisions if our hospitals get overloaded, and who do we choose to provide, you know, life-saving support to, and who we don't. And we had, let's just say we had a doctor there, and his conversation to all of us is, look, I know this is contentious, but we need to be objective and rational. And my response to him was, yes, but the problem is who gets to decide what is objective and rational at the end of the day? I wasn't at that meeting around doing those sorts of things. So I think there's some I think the thinking has already happened in that space, but there's some, I think there's some concepts and some ideas that we probably need to challenge, because again, I don't, who does conflict of interest benefit? It definitely doesn't benefit us. Got it?
I also wanted to add on to the concept of conflict of interest, where we have, you know, if we're Māori trying to support other Māori, then it's conflict of interest. But we don't think about, well, if it's non-Māori who are on Māori resources, on Māori whenua, is it not also a conflict of their interest if they were to, you know, bring in their biases that they don't know that they have, to keep Māori away from those whenua resources?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry, you know, I thought this was going to be short, but somehow I've linked it out. Rewa, do we still have a bit more time? Okay, cool. All right. Are we happy to close? All right. Tēnā koutou katoa, kua taimau mātou ki te whakamutunga o te hui nei. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, ki ngā kai kōrero o te rā, ngā mihi ki a koutou mo tō kōrero, te rerenga o ngā kōrero me ngā hua o ngā kōrero. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, ki a koutou katoa te whānau, ko hara mai e tautoko ana, ngā mihi nui, ngā mihi manahana ki a koutou. Me whakakapi au I tēnei wahanga o te hui, I te karakia a mua ka haere rātou ki te kai. Me enoi tātou. Kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou are ki oi kuraiti, me te aroa o te atua, me te whiwhi ngātahitanga ki te wairua tapu, āke, āmene. Kia ora.